Thank you, Robbie.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, everyone that helped bring this series together pretty quickly. Um, as Robbie mentioned, this is part two of three. So a couple weeks ago, I did a basic introduction to telemental health and related to gambling disorder. Today, we're going to get more into a little bit deeper into the how-to with some clinical considerations. And then next week, part three is going to go a little more into specific populations, like how to work with families, groups, and how to handle emergencies online. That's kind of its own separate topic. I want to make sure I have time for that. So that is going to be in part three. So hopefully you can join us next week as well. So, as we know, we're kind of in this brave new world. Many of us have been forced into into using telemental health for behavioral health and the medical side as well. Um, so many of you may find yourself suddenly having to learn about this, whether or not you ever wanted to or ever planned to, and that's okay. As Robbie mentioned, my entire practice is telemental health. Um, and I'm actually moving towards an office and a blended approach when this is all over. But for the past few years, I have been doing this exclusively online, and I have done it in the past at a virtual school setting and really loved it and really love the difference it can make for people. So that's how I got started with it. So the focus of this is going to be helping you modify what you're doing currently to the synchronous telemental health setting. So if you didn't join us last week, we differentiate between synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous is the real time. It's usually video or phone. Asynchronous is more of the text-based chat, things like that. With COVID-19 and kind of the demand to suddenly go virtual, the emphasis really is on synchronous, and a lot of the exceptions to the rules that are being made and things like that are really only focusing on synchronous. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So there's a lot of the research on telemental health has really been focused on validating it and demonstrating its effectiveness for a variety of populations or specific diagnoses. So what we know about the research of telemental health, specifically with gambling disorder, is that it really parallels the research being done for other populations. So we know that it removes a lot of barriers to treatment, just like any other issue. With gambling, we tend to see a little bit higher stigma, some more issues with scheduling. They might still be working full time, might use as an excuse a lot. This kind of removes that. Previously validated assessments and interventions, so things we're already using, can be modified usually pretty easily for a telemental health setting. Individual, group, and family can all be conducted. Again, I'll get into the group and family next week. And there are some features of telemental health that make it more effective for specific populations. So think of your clients that might have co-occurring diagnoses, or ones that are parenting or caregiving maybe for an older adult, or work an atypical schedule. It can be more effective for them because it brings access. It's the issue of access. And then some of the cons you might see in the research or people discuss, keep in mind those can be very subjective. What can be a con for someone could be a pro for somebody else. So, for example, I work with a couple clients who really suffer with social anxiety. So a con for one might be, oh, I don't get to go somewhere and see you face to face if we're talking on the phone. That might really be a pro for somebody who struggles with social settings or interpreting nonverbals, things like that. So kind of take those with a grain of salt. Everyone's different. It's about meeting them where they are. So, into the research a little bit further, there have been some studies that have examined very specific intersections of TMH and problem gambling beyond just the general, does it work or not? But it's a really new area of research. So when we have young research, young literature body, we can't really generalize it just yet, right? Because we can't get everything to apply to everybody. So you really have to interpret the results of these studies at face value and decide if they're going to be relative to your specific client. Overall, the literature is very positive, frankly, on demonstrating effectiveness for specific groups or preferences, things like that. There's been a lot of outcome research on hotlines, right? We've known that for a while. We know hotlines are a big cornerstone of gambling treatment right now. There's been some on format preferences, so male versus female, if they prefer phone versus video. Some differences in terms of game of choice, which is pretty interesting to think about. Preferences to age, different demographics. But again, nothing we can really generalize yet. So just something to keep in mind is if you see a study or see, an announcement about some research, we have to be careful. It is being researched. It's just there's still not enough out there yet. So right now, we talk about any kind of intervention or anything we're doing in our clinical practice, we have to make sure it's the best fit, right? Well, guess what? Now we're kind of in a position we may not have that choice. So when we talk about screening for the telemental health setting, you may not have that luxury right now of screening whether or not it is the appropriate fit. It may be what is the best fit. Some clients may opt to just say, you know what, I'll see you on the other side. I don't want to do telehealth, and that's okay. The best thing you can do is try to check in with them, give them some other resources if possible, depending on your area. They may not want to engage, and that's okay. But for those who do want to continue, right now, we have to look at what form might be the best fit. So we have to look at resources. Do they have access to the technology? Do they have a tablet, a smartphone, a computer? Is there a backup plan? Do they have high-speed internet? Do they have to rely just on cell networks, which can go up and down? Wi-Fi is going up and down. I'm sure many of you are realizing with the demand on Zoom and platforms like this, the Wi-Fi is getting a little overloaded. That's okay, but we need to have that backup plan. So what happens if the call drops, if the video drops? What are you going to do instead? Privacy is a big one. As we know that there's a little bit more of a risk of IPV with gambling. So if we were looking at a domestic violence or interpersonal violence situation, really have to think about the privacy beyond just, do they have a good place to have the conversation, have the session? So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind right now with various, with quarantine rules and stay-at-home orders. They may be in situations where it's not safe because of who's in the home. They may have a private place in the home to talk, but it may not be safe to actually have the session certain times of day under certain circumstances. So just when you're having that conversation, we have to go a little bit further and say, hey, I know everyone's at home right now. Is there a time, or do you have a place in the home that, will be a safe place for you to talk? I have had clients right now that are doing, sessions from their parked car in their driveway. It's what they can do. If there's too much noise in the house or they need to maybe avoid someone, you work with what you have. But that's something you need to discuss, is the privacy and the safety aspect of it. I always share with my clients, and when we talk, I'm in a private setting. Sometimes if someone's really concerned, I will pick my laptop up and kind of show them the room I'm in. Hey, there's the door, it's closed. No one else is with me except maybe my dog. That my family is not around me right now. I tell them what I'm doing to ensure the privacy and safety on my end to help them feel secure too. Support system. So talking about everyone being around right now, who is around if they need help or support after the session? We'll get into this too, a little bit more too with emergencies next week, but who is their emergency contact? Who's around if they have tech issues, if they need that in-person support, if they have an emergency? There's local resources for emergencies. So, making sure if it's not someone in your area that you've discussed, hey, where's your local emergency room? What other resources might be open right now? If they are receiving care, maybe for some co-occurring stuff, hey, what's your psychiatrist doing? Just want to double check. Are they doing telehealth too? Like, do we need to touch base with them? Those kinds of things. Because they may not be thinking this through, how things are different for them with other areas of care. And personal preference, exploring their answer can really give you some good insight. You're talking about this, hey, I have option of a phone, or I have a HIPAA compliant portal that I use, and I offer my clients the choice, if I can. Many insurance payers want you to do at least one session face-to-face on the video and then switch to phone. But I discuss this with my clients, what the preference would be, and it really gives you some insight. I had a client discuss, she was kind of nervous, and we realized that we actually didn't live that far from each other. So we were talking through those issues, and I offered her phone-based. I said, well, if you're not comfortable face-to-face because you don't want to see who I am, so you don't recognize me in the grocery store, I'm okay with that. And she thought about it, and she said, you know what, I game on my phone. I want to do video on my phone. So when I pick up my phone, I think of your face and not my game. That was pretty funny, but that was really telling that she was really committed, and she wanted to change her association with her technology device from gaming to getting help. So we did the sessions, she had the video chat up on her phone. So it was kind of interesting to hear her preference and to talk through that. So informed consent, kind of getting more into the nuts and bolts of how to do this. There's really no specific right or wrong in terms of informed consent. Everyone's always, looks a little bit different. If you work in an agency, get guidance from them first. If you're in private practice, you have the freedom to kind of do this however you're comfortable. You want to look into if you have any other policies in place that could affect this, or any kind of unwritten rules that would need to be spelled out. So I have seen it both ways. I've seen some people completely rewriting their disclosure and consent documents and having everybody sign them again, just like first of the year. Or they're creating emergency ones that are modifiers, and they're just having people engaging in telehealth specifically sign those. So there's really no right or wrong, but bottom line is it's informed consent. You want to discuss it with your clients. You want to talk about the pros and cons. You want to make sure it's a good fit for them, and you want to get their consent that they agree to the risks and benefits, just like anything else, right? So some of the policies that could come into play a little bit more with telehealth than face-to-face is contact between sessions. Some telehealth providers will charge for contact between sessions if it's a text conversation. Some are comfortable with text between sessions. Some say, you know what, you have to call me between sessions. I don't want a text message. It really depends on your existing rules, guidelines, how you're already working with your clients. I do a lot of EAP work, that is telesupport, that's phone-based specifically. And I have a separate phone just for my clinical work. So I allow clients to text me on that phone because I've got it locked down with PIN and fingerprint. I don't save names. I get the number. I go into my secure portal, look up the name. I have ways to protect that, protect their privacy. So I don't mind texts because it's not on my personal phone, and I have a way to protect their privacy a little bit more than I would on my personal phone. So it's kind of an individual choice. Using video versus phone, again, a lot of payers will say you can go to phone after you've had that video session, or they will only pay for video sessions, or EAPs will allow for only phone. So you have to kind of spell out the conditions that you would use it, or they would have a choice. Cancellation and rescheduling. A lot of people tell me that moving to telehealth or a blended approach where some face-to-face, some tele, actually cuts down on a lot of the scheduling issues. Because if someone is at home, they don't have the issues they might have with a commute or things like that. I'm very flexible personally with canceling and rescheduling, because that's just kind of the cornerstone of my practice, is that flexibility and meeting people where they are. And I have the ability to do that. So I didn't make any specific changes to my policies in that regard, because if they need to cancel or reschedule, chances are, I'll have an opening. And it's really about meeting them where they are, in my opinion. Potential benefits and risk. This is a big one to talk out, because some of the things we have, in addition to the typical things we discuss with benefits and risk with treating gambling disorder, not having that, being in the same space, there are risks in terms of privacy and confidentiality. The most secure is face-to-face in an enclosed room. The next step is over a landline, and who has landlines, right? It's kind of rare. Even on your computer, Wi-Fi isn't considered secure or private. So, really the most secure method is to really, physically wire in your computers to the internet. Most people use Wi-Fi. So discussing that these are risks. Things can get hacked. It's just kind of the way of life. We heard about the Zoom bombing a couple weeks ago, where people are getting into each other's Zoom sessions and playing pranks and doing all kinds of stuff. These things are just part of our, technological environment. So you have to talk through them because it is a potential risk. I reassure my clients, I don't record sessions, but that is a risk that someone could be on the other side of that door recording them when they're talking. So little things like that we have to work through. And then definitely discussing emergency procedures as part of that, because it does look a little different. If someone is in your office and suddenly starts a panic attack or has a medical issue, you're right there to intervene. If they are home, then there's a greater risk. If they're home by themselves, they have to try to help themselves, or there's a way that, basically you get a second device and call 911 and assist them that way. So just some other things to think through and talk through. Financial considerations are a big one. Insurance does cover it. There's kind of this myth that, well, it's not covered, it's private pay only. And that's not true. I've only had one company deny me because I'm 100% telehealth. And honestly, I haven't tried. I don't know. It's been 3 years. Maybe if I tried again, they'd credential me. But I'm on panels with Cigna and Blue Cross and Anthem and all the big ones, Optum. They're all on board now. So it's not just private pay. So, and for the most part, some of the EAPs differentiate, but for the most part, the reimbursement has been the same for me for private insurance. And then another aspect of that duty to warn in the involvement of third parties. So whatever vendor you're using for your telehealth, they are essentially a third party. So getting into, duty to warn stays the same, right? We still have to break confidentiality at certain times, but the vendor piece is like having that third person in your space. So sharing who your vendor is, if they are HIPAA compliant, if you have a BAA with them, referring them to the vendor directly if they have questions to read the fine print, that kind of thing. So for example, on mine, I use a program called We Counsel that is HIPAA compliant. And I explain, this is what I use, this is why I chose this, here's the link, you can look at it, look it up yourself. You can ask questions. I also discuss, the rules I have for my cell phone. So they understand the technology that I am using and the risks and benefits to what I'm using. They are responsible on their side of things, right? They're responsible for their phone settings. I can't check if they're recording things. I can't check if they have privacy, issues on their phone. A big one is with technology like Siri and Google Assistant and even Facebook kind of listening in if you don't turn those features off. So usually when I am on sessions, I turn my personal phone completely off because what has happened before is that I'll have a session, I had a smoking cessation session, and about an hour later I was on Facebook and I started seeing all these smart ads for Chantix. And actually, yesterday I started getting ads for a boarding school for children with ADHD. And I was just talking, I had 3 sessions back to back with parents of children with ADHD yesterday. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. My phone picked up on it. It's been listening. So things like that we have to be careful of. So that just kind of goes into a bit of the duty to warn and talking about the potential risks of using the phone. So switching gears a little bit, after we've gone through the informed consent piece, getting into assessments. Excuse me. So looking at how are you already doing it? How are you currently assessing? If your style is more of a therapeutic interview, not much needs to change. You're still having the conversation. So if you use hard copy assessments where you have the client fill them out and then give them back to you, there's the good old snail mail and return, right? Kind of slows things down. You can email, print, scan it, have them email back. Security risks with that if your email is not encrypted. When you look at vendors, we'll talk about this a little bit later. When you look at vendors, a lot of them offer secure portals for messaging and things like that. So that kind of gets around it if you don't have an encrypted email. Digitized assessments. So this is where you can take your document, scan it, and convert it to a fillable PDF that the person can just click, send, and email back to you if they don't have a printer. And then online versions may or may not exist. They may have some cost to them. This is an area that's being developed pretty quickly. For example, one of the assessments I will use from time to time is the Addiction Severity Index, the ASI. The ASI has gone completely digital, so I can just send my clients a link to ASIMV, and they do the assessment, and then I get a notification it's done, and all my data is right there online. So if you're using instruments, just some ideas, just some things to think about how you can modify them. There's one that you love that you always use. Do a quick Google search, see if someone else has already taken it online, and saved you a step, hopefully. The link I have at the bottom is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health from Canada. This is a fantastic website. I love CAMH. Bookmark this, click it, save it. It is their assessment page, and they have everything from links to these assessments, PDFs, how to conduct sample scripts on how to discuss assessments with your clients. It's a really great resource. So if you haven't hooked into that resource yet, absolutely do. It's fantastic for gambling assessments. So real quick with brief screeners, these are, short 2-3 questions. These can be added very easily to what you're doing already, and you can do these verbally. These are just a few examples. By no means an exhaustive list, but going through kind of the more recent research, you see the citation at the bottom was 2018. These are the 3 that have been recently, considered most validated again. So real quick, and you don't have to do anything differently with these, you can just ask these questions in your intake verbally. So getting into the longer assessments, and again, we're talking about adapting. We don't have to actually modify these assessments to use them through telehealth. And, you don't want to, because then they could become invalid. So when we're considering assessments, look at what exactly you're assessing. Is it just problem gambling? Are you also doing mental health assessment? Which diagnostic criteria with gambling and other addiction-related disorders? We've had big changes between the DSM-3, 4, and 5. We tend not to think about the DSM-3 anymore, but the SOGS was normed on the DSM-3. It hasn't really been updated too much. If you've looked at the SOGS recently, some of the language that uses the term like loan sharks and things like that. So some of these instruments that we've been using may not have made that shift to the 5. The 5 only came out May of 2013. So 7 years ago. It takes this, it takes the research community a while to assess and validate these instruments to new criteria. So you just want to make sure whatever you're using lines up with the diagnostic criteria that you're using. Also have to think about cultural considerations and how adaptable is it to telehealth. Accuracy, the study at the bottom, the Williams and Volberg, this is kind of their list of the ones that they consider most accurate, looking to DSM-5 criteria. So if you need a quick update on gambling assessment in general, take a look at those 4. PPGM, it seems to be, the PPGM and the NODs are, I think, the most popular right now from what I'm seeing with my colleagues. But you shouldn't you shouldn't change the assessment because you're doing telehealth. It's just adapting it. I get a lot of questions of, well, should I just shorten this? It's too many pages to send. No, do not touch the assessments themselves. You just have to get a little creative in how we administer them. So getting into interventions, one thing I hear a lot is that, telemental health is an intervention, and it's not. It's just a setting. It's just a setting. It's not doing anything different in terms of how you're treating people. It's just the clinical setting. So any talk therapy approaches you're already doing are still going to work. I've been working one-on-one and in small groups, trying to help clinicians get online pretty quickly. And there's a lot of anxiety, around, oh my gosh, everything's changing. It is, but for us, we're still talking, we're still connecting with our clients. So anything you're already doing in terms of talk therapy is still going to work. It's just we're changing how we're doing it. So when we talk about, a lot of our clients have co-occurring, right? We see that a lot with gambling disorder. By the time they come to us, there's a lot of other stuff going on. Other providers, keep in mind, may or may not be doing telehealth. Some are comfortable with it, have the ability to do it. Some may be holding off what they consider non-essential appointments. So we're kind of seeing people relying on kind of short-term solutions. So like a teledoc setup or live health online, kind of like the online urgent care model, because their regular providers may not be able to provide telehealth. So just keep that in mind. If you were collaborating with somebody or, communicating about someone's care, they may or may not be in business right now or be working. So that could also be very stressful for the client. If you're trying to refer them to someone, you have to also kind of help them figure out, okay, who's even available right now and taking new patients. Or they may need help reaching out to their current providers to see what they're doing. There have been some changes in the rules just in the last couple of weeks. With a crisis, we know information changes quickly and it varies even by region. So there have been changes in the rules from the DEA governing med management appointments and prescribing. We have some mixed opinions about this professionally, but waiving some med management appointments that are typically required for amphetamine-based and psychotropic meds, just to keep people out of the office and keep them safe. And prescribing opiates now without a face-to-face appointment. They're allowing that through telehealth under certain circumstances. So just be aware of that. Billing outside of, if you're obviously part of the gambling network and already linked into that, we're talking about billing outside of that. So billing, if you're in private practice, working with third-party payers. A lot of them have established temporary or changed their rules and have communicated that. But again, there's so much information coming right now. I don't know about you, but I'm getting really overwhelmed with my email volume with all these updates. So take a minute, check out the websites of people with whom you're credentialed and paneled to see what their current policies are. From my experience, having been doing this in North Carolina for 3 years, the CPT code is the same. I'm still billing my 90834. I'm just billing a different location code. So 1 is office, 2 is telehealth. So I'm still doing my usual billing. It's just a different location code. So that really hasn't changed because that has been in place for a while. It may just be new to providers to know where to look for that. So, but it's already there for most payers. And then another big issue coming up is 12-step support. It's really going to vary by region for your clients because a couple groups in my area I know instantly tried to go online, and then the question was raised, well, there goes the anonymity because now you're attached to an IP address. And now there's electronic record. Everything we do online is permanent record. So what does that do to the anonymous part? So people are deciding that group by group. So right now there may be a change in the availability of 12-step support. So just something we have to keep in mind as we're discussing that with our clients. So with workbooks, we know gambling, one approach has been the use of workbooks for clients who really aren't interested in engaging in therapy. They want to kind of do it on their own. Workbooks do assume a person has a certain level of motivation, self-regulation, and cognitive functioning, right? But we do know for those that have those abilities, they can be effective. So I just have some links there if you're not familiar with the workbook approach, just so you can see what a few of these look like. And they're already online. So these are materials that maybe you're used to having in hard copy, but these are great links. You can just send directly to your clients, or you can download them and save them as PDFs and send them to your clients that way. But we see workbook approaches used a little more with gambling disorder, I think, than other addiction-related disorders. So, it's just another way, to to get them started. So similar with the workbook, there's research, really recent study last year on what they call IBI, internet-based intervention. So if you think of the workbook concept, this is the online version of this, because we know that research supports the use of workbooks in the self-study approach for problem gambling for some people. IBI are online self-directed programs. So it's like the digital workbook. It's just another tool and kind of our range of treatment options that we want to offer people. Some of the concerns the researchers noted were, losing the human connection, which we know can be an issue with gambling disorder anyway. The ability to communicate, read emotion, things like that. Some really far into gambling disorder, they may be more comfortable with the self-directed approach, but we know others need that face-to-face to start to rebuild those skills. So this is just another tool. Just know that, even in kind of the workbook world, they've already looked at doing things online and developing different internet-based interventions. There's another acronym that gets really confusing in the literature if you're searching this. CBT, we know is cognitive behavioral therapy. Someone has also coined that term for computer-based therapy. And those are treatment modalities that are completely online with either a counselor overseeing or no interaction with the counselor at all. So just keep in mind, CBT is one term out there. I like the IBI because it doesn't confuse us with the therapeutic modality we're already using. I get a lot of questions about apps. Apps, give us another kind of independent approach to treatment, or can be, a tool to use in therapy to kind of augment what we're doing. And they kind of fall into, a few general categories. So we have symptom tracker and information management apps, guided relaxation apps where it's really just one way. There's no data being taken. It's just you play this and follow it. And psychoeducation behavioral change apps. So that's like the one being advertised a lot right now, Noom, that's the one for weight loss. That's an example of the psychoed behavioral change approach. So they usually fall in one of these three categories. There's also apps that just provide assessment, little quizzes you can take. And we know apps can be specific to diagnosis. They can be very broad. These are proliferating, faster than we can study them, right? It doesn't take a lot of effort really to develop an app these days and get it on the market and get it through, Google Play and the Apple Store. So we have to be really, really careful with apps. I often get asked, what app do I recommend? I don't, because I can't control the updates and the information. I talk to clients about the risks with them. There was a study that came out, I think a couple of years ago, that said that they studied 12 apps and they didn't name them, but found significant data breaches and data selling. So it was a little scary. So it's just kind of a buyer beware. And I just talk with the client about, hey, just make sure you read the fine print. Make sure you're comfortable with the privacy settings and that you know how they're using your data. We have to be really careful with it. The link there is to the Toros et al. Article that's cited on the bottom of the slide. There's that Toros article, I think, had like 15 authors. It was very in-depth, but it's a great summary of kind of where we are in terms of our understanding of the risks with data collection and the regulations surrounding apps. It's a pretty easy read in terms of research articles. So I would encourage you to glance through it and think about how you're using apps in your practice, because it's just a great summary of kind of where we are with it. So again, just be really careful with your recommendations because it can become a liability issue. I might recommend very vaguely if someone really does use a phone a lot, hey, are there apps you're already using? For example, like Fitbit, are you already tracking information in that we can discuss? But I don't specifically recommend one app over the other just because I don't want to take on that liability of having to keep up with that and the changes that the developers are making. So when we talk about getting a little bit deeper into the interventions, video-based is the closest we can get to face-to-face, right? close as we can do right now. So you want to verify that, hey, is this still a good time to meet? They have their privacy. Again, hey, just double check. Just want to make sure that you're good. No one's around you. You've got privacy. It's okay to talk. Coming up with that backup plan if the video fails. So the portal that I use has video, but it also has a chat room embedded. So if our video cuts out, we can chat real quick. Hey, are you okay on your end? Sometimes our backup plan will be going to phone. It might be if someone's laptop dies, do they want to jump on the app on their phone, the video application on their phone? Do they want to just go to phone and not be face-to-face? Just things to talk through. It's going to be different for everybody, but making sure you have that backup plan. And remember, you can't see their entire space. I actually had a client who, young adult male, working on gambling and smoking cessation in marijuana. And typically when we talked, he was either in his car on break from work or kind of in this blank wall. And one day he is in what looked like an office, and there were all these degrees on the wall, these frame things on the wall. And I said, hey, just make sure you're in a good space. I'm like, this looks different than last week. And he started laughing. He just put his head down. His mother was a social worker, and he was visiting her and was in her office and had never shared with me that his mom was a social worker because he was embarrassed. And it kind of got into this good conversation about how everything we were discussing is stuff his mom had already been trying to tell him for years. So it was pretty funny. But I had no idea that, his mom was a social worker, and he had all this other knowledge he didn't really want to dive into because it came from mom, until I'm like, oh, there's suddenly a master's degree on the wall behind you. I'm like, what's going on? So it's kind of funny. One thing we run into with video-based is the eye contact, right? So where your camera is and how sophisticated your camera is affects that. The distance from the person to the screen affects the perception of eye contact. So it's something we kind of have to let go of, because our clients, especially if they're not comfortable with it, they may look like they're looking to the side, they're looking down. They might kind of be in an extreme close-up mode where they're really leaning into the screen because they're trying to see you. Or they think they have to be close to the screen to be seen. So we kind of have to relax a little bit on the eye contact, especially when I work with adolescents. If they have sessions in their room, I actually don't mind if they're building Lego or doing something else and not looking at me. It's okay. So you have to think about where you are in terms of eye contact, and even discussing that with clients. Some clients really rely on that, some not so much. So usually if it's a new client, I'll ask, hey, I just want to touch base. How did this work for you? How did you feel? Was it strange for you? Was it okay? Did I look okay to you on my screen, kind of thing? I have some clients that prefer I sit closer. I have some clients that prefer more of a distance because they want to see my entire upper body versus kind of the floating head look that we get on webcams. So just more things to talk about with your clients. Vendor factor is a big one. How easy is this technology to use? As you are exploring this, there are a lot of different vendors out there. Some provide the referral stream for you and treat you as a contractor. Some just give you the tools and you have your private practice. My choice was, I use WeCounsel because I'm developing, this is my private practice. I don't need the referral stream, and I don't want to be a contractor. I want to be able to own every part of my practice. Some people are more comfortable signing up with someone else who already handles the technology and the billing and everything for them and the intake and just providing the services. So it's really individual choice, but you want to look at how easy it is for you to use and your clients. What other features do they offer that could make the experience a little more dynamic than just what I call park and bark in front of a screen? Screen layout is a big deal too, because with the sharing, do the clients want to see themselves, and do you want to see yourself? I mean, I don't know about you. I didn't train in counseling with a mirror in front of me on the desk. I didn't train with being able to see myself all the time in live video feed. It can be a little strange at first. So some of the platforms have options where you can click and change your layout. You can actually hide yourself And you can tell the client about that as well. If they don't want to see themselves in the process too, there's usually a feature they can hide their window. It's just a matter of kind of getting in there and playing with it. It's great to get a family member on board, have them be your guinea pig, and just leave an open screen while you play with all these features and make note of your settings. I have gotten to the point, I do keep my little picture in picture just so I can be aware of things like lighting changes. I have a lot of natural light in my room. I want to make sure that I'm still coming across, in a way that I'm still centered in the screen and things like that. But it took me a while to get comfortable with that, honestly. So just some things to think about. Some, it can be used as a great feedback tool, and some it's just a distraction. With the phone-based, one of the biggest concerns is verifying identity, because if we're face-to-face, we recognize the person. With the phone, there's some concern that it may not be who you think it is. So some clinicians will actually use code words and say, or ask a question that only that person would know to verify identity if they're not comfortable with it, or if they haven't talked to the person in a while. Just some ideas there. Again, you still want to verify that it's a good time, they're in a safe place. Again, having that backup plan with the phone. I always tell my clients, hey, if we get disconnected, I'm going to call you right back. In situations right now, we're seeing a lot more IPV situations, frankly, with the stay-at-home orders. So that plan might look a little different, that if the call suddenly drops, I'm going to ask the client to text me, or I might text them something really mundane that wouldn't be obvious that it was a clinician. But you come up with that plan ahead of time, just in case of technology failures. Again, you don't have those nonverbals. So we have to pay attention to things like vocal inflection, pace of speech, silence. Some people are really uncomfortable with silence on the phone because they're constantly afraid the call dropped. So it's getting comfortable with things like, you know what, I'm thinking, give me a second. Or saying something that is going to be an impact. Say, take a second and just think about that, kind of giving them permission to be quiet. We don't have to fill the space on the phone. But, on the other end, the other side of that is that there could be a distraction factor. So someone, could be multitasking while they're on the phone with you. I literally have had people, I didn't realize it until they stopped somewhere that they were driving, which is really not safe. I've had people go, oh, hang on a minute. And they start ordering their lunch at McDonald's or something like that. It's kind of crazy. I always, when I discuss safety, I mention specifically driving because we're used to talking in the car. It's not a safe place to have counseling. So just be aware that people could be multitasking. So if you start to hear things in the background, you can ask about that. Use those immediacy skills. This might be challenging for them. Oftentimes, what I find is that without the distractions of the nonverbals, of processing my face and me processing theirs, without that, people are staring into space or staring at a blank wall. They talk so much more and they get so much out. I've had a lot of clients tell me that therapy goes faster on the phone because they're just getting through more. They're not going through the commute and waiting in the office and the anxiety and things like that. They're in their environments. They can address things that are going on in their here and now in a more comfortable setting, most of the time, hopefully with fewer distractions. And they just talk more, I find, on the phone. So just something to consider. I had this slide in the last presentation as well, but just a good reminder that, everyone's kind of throwing trainings up right now because it's very relevant. If this is something you're interested in, there are pathways to more detailed training, and there are credentials for this. I started out with Ready Minds. They offer what they used to call the distance credentialed counselor. So if you see the term DCC, that was the credential until fall of 2018. And then we were grandfathered into what's called Board Certified Telemental Health Provider, or BCTMH. And I think that was mostly a response to the fact that it wasn't just counselors doing this. We have social workers, psychologists, physicians. So it's a more inclusive term. The Center for Credentialing Education, CCE, still is running that program. So there's a link to their information about their credentials, but they're using a different training source. I was trained, honestly, back in 2005. So I've been doing this for a while in different settings. So I highly recommend it. This is something you're interested in doing long term. Pursue credentialing, pursue this training. It's a little more expensive, but it is really worth it to really get into the details and to have that support. The other resource that I love is the Telebehavioral Health Institute that's run by Dr. Marlene Mayhew. They have amazing, they have a great newsletter that talks about issues you can get for free. They have great programs for CEUs and very specific telehealth related topics, regardless of disorder. So this is focusing on how it affects our gambling world, but they have, they cover kind of everybody. They have a certification process as well. They're relatively newer, but it's another great resource. They even offer consultation. So if you're thinking of kind of launching this into private practice, they have a full range of consultants as well. So just some other resources kind of beyond this, if this is something you're interested in, beyond kind of our short-term crisis. So open it up. I know we only have a few more minutes. We can open up to questions. And again, I can stay later if people like. I also have my contact information. That number is my clinical phone. So if I don't answer, chances are I'm in a session with somebody. It's okay. Just leave me a message. You can also send me a text. That is my work email. And then the portal.wecounsel, that is my link to my virtual office if you want to see what it looks like, or even connect with me there. I'm also happy to connect with you however you want to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jessica. Great stuff. And we've had some questions. I didn't want to interrupt your role there. You did great. Great stuff. Okay, so let me go back to our first chat, and then I might even be able to unmute some folks eventually here. But so everybody, I sent out a group chat or text here that said the recorded version of this will be on the UNC Behavioral Health website. Springboard website. So the slides will be there in the next couple of days, and so will the recorded version. With saying that, Kim asked, do you have a sample of what your disclosure may look like, and are you willing to share it?
If you want to see my disclosure, no worries. Just send me an email and I'll just send it right back to you. I didn't want to include it in this because, again, being recorded, you don't know where it's going to get shared, right? Yeah. We update it year to year. But I have no problem if you're trying to see kind of what a template looks like or how some of the language looks. I have no problem sharing it individually. So just send me an email.
Cool. And yeah, and again, this contact information you see on the screen will be on the slides that we'll have on the website. Interesting about talking and sharing more on the phone. I like that too, Jessica, what you were saying. Our clients seem to share more on the phone. And then also Amanda says, comments, glad to hear insurance is on board with telehealth. And I would imagine if they weren't, they are now, right? Right. Let's see here. And I apologize. I had some folks that were having some problems with seeing their screen. I hope they were able to see it. If for some reason they couldn't find it in their profile, again, check out the recorded version here. And if you've been online the whole time through the Zoom, you'll get your CEU credit. Let's see here. The next question, as far as the statement you made about using your phone to protect privacy from the ads, can you repeat that point?
With my clinical phone, I'm going to pull up, you can actually see. So it's a smartphone. It's a very dumbed down smartphone. Everything is stripped off. This is literally, my selfie light's going to glare off. This is it. This is all I have.
Interesting.
I have a Chrome. I have Google Maps to back up my personal phone in case I get lost somewhere. I have my text messaging. I have Signal, which is a secure encrypted texting app I will use for clinical content. Beyond scheduling, I have a couple clients that I have given permission to contact me for clinical things via text. I use that because it's encrypted. My voicemail, my Gmail, and then I have the red icon is ACR, which is a call recorder that I have had to use for supervision, but it's it's secured. or the version I pay for is secured. I actually don't use that anymore. But those for emergencies, I will, I will record a call if I have to call 911 for an emergency, just so I don't miss details. But that is it. So I don't save contact info. I will check the phone every time, like this is on Sprint, so every time Sprint updates it, I will actually go back through my apps and see if they have just downloaded something for fun that I didn't, really want, and clean it off. But the biggest thing, is talking to your clients about it. That, hey, this is what I've done on my phone. I don't save your number. I look up your number in my secure site to see who I'm talking to. And if you're texting me about appointments, just, keep in mind that, we're not going to talk about clinical stuff. You can just cancel or reschedule. And then it's protected with fingerprint and PIN, which are, standard options on, any smartphone these days anyway. But I let them know that I have, kind of a double security process on the phone. Fingerprint is great because no one can steal your fingerprint easily, right?
Yeah.
My kids can figure out my password to anything at this point, but they can't actually unlock my phone. So I hope that answered your question on kind of how we deal with it. I mean, it's separate. I have my separate personal phone. This is just for clinical stuff, and I'm really careful to keep them separate.
Good, thank you. Yeah, we're coming up on the hour, so if you have to leave us, we're at 1 minute till. So thank you, and remember that Jessica will continue her, actually the part 3 of the 3-part series on this. So it'll be next week at this, same bat channel, same bat time, right?
That's right.
We'll do this, April 30th. So if you've got a couple of more minutes, Jessica, we got a couple other questions.
Yeah, and if you have anything specific, that one I'm kind of polishing it up right now. But if there's anything specific in terms of family, group, and emergencies that you want to know about, shoot me an email. I'll work it in.
Yeah, that's good. Nice. Yeah. Okay, Melissa asked something that I think you covered on the last one on part 1, but what are the requirements associated with provided multi-state telehealth services, and are we required to be licensed in every state that we provide services
Yes,
to?
you are. It's great. So state law, licensure for any profession, licensure is by state. We're bound by state law. So the concept is that the counseling happens in both the state where we're located and where the client is. Counseling is taking place on both ends of that interaction. So you have to be licensed in both places. So I carry licenses in Ohio, where I'm originally from, North Carolina, and then Florida has what they call a registered telehealth provider program, where I was given privileges. As long as I'm not in the boundaries of Florida, I can work with people in Florida. So we're seeing states start to develop their own things. I'm in Waxhaw, which is just south of Charlotte. I'm literally 3 miles from the South Carolina line. So a lot of providers in our area are having problems with our South Carolina clients who suddenly can't leave home. South Carolina allows for a very limited number of hours with South Carolina clients without being licensed, for example. If you're in a situation that is temporary, say you live somewhere, we have a pretty big state, we have a big border. Mm-hmm. If you live somewhere where you've got clients across the state line, you can reach out to the other state's board and give them the situation. Hey, due to COVID-19, I'm working with a client that was traveling to me. Now we're doing telehealth. Can I have permission to continue working with this specific person? So you can get exceptions, it's state by state, board by board, but you can get temporary exemptions typically if it's a client you've been working with. If you're looking just to kind of set up shop and expand your practice, you do have to be licensed in the various states. And it is one of the biggest barriers we're facing. Psychology has developed PsyPact, which is an agreement among states to accept each other's licenses. Yeah. Counseling, social work, marriage and family therapy, we are not there yet. Medical boards, nursing, and psychology have made more progress to this. So keep advocating, keep talking to ACA. When you get the, I know I'm a licensed counselor, so I can't speak for the other boards, social work, or anything like that. But I know ACA, we're getting a lot of emails like, hey, click on this link, tell your congressman how this is affecting you, affecting us professionally. And I'm really hitting it hard that we need to get better reciprocity laws because telehealth is needed for a lot of different reasons, even before this. I think, you know, maybe this is going to kind of spark that change that we need. But yeah, right now it's you do have to be licensed in multiple states.
Okay, great. All right, we've got another. Someone else just asked. They they let's see here. Yeah, they're in on someone else's Zoom account. Whoever that is, email Jamisia and let them know your name and the Zoom account that is associated, and we'll try to work through this. Jamisia's email address is JHOLLI, D as in David, AY, J Holiday with 2 L's, at unc.edu, and just let her know your name and the name of the account that we're working with. We had a couple of participants raise their hand, so let me try to unmute them real quickly here in our last. Okay, Gail, you're on.
I didn't mean to be raising my hand. So I'm
It's okay.
I'm raising
All right.
my hand.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Gail. It was nice speaking to you earlier. Let's see here. I've got someone here that says, oh gosh, it keeps messing me up. Come on, unmute. That's what I need a class. Oh, here we are. Okay. And it's well,
There we
it's
go.
BK. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. Did you have a question for Jessica?
I did not. I just had asked about, I can't see anyone on the screen but the speaker, so I wondered about that. Usually you can see people.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think it's in your profiles there. But you know, the recorded version of this, so you can see the slides, and the slides will be available on the UNC Behavioral Health website, the Springboard website. Sorry about that. But I think if you go into viewing,
Are you talking about seeing the other participants?
Yes, I can see all the questions. I can see the information, but I can't see anything else. I can't see the participants.
Oh,
that's intentional.
Yeah, that's strategy. Yeah, that was intentional. Yes.
I don't think everyone wants to be recorded.
Yeah, and we had, it looked like 92 participants on today, I think, registered well, it showed 90 something. Now we're at 60. A few dropped off. So, but anyways, thank you for joining us today. Let's see. Let me see. I think there were a couple more. I think that might be it. Yeah, I don't see anyone else. We've just got a lot of folks. Yeah, okay, I got you. Thanks, Ashley. All right. Hey, Jessica, thanks again. This is good stuff. I really enjoyed what you said. Even some of this stuff I'm going to tie into my Zoom, because I know, listen, it's a different world when you're presenting, or of course, when you're providing clinical services to your client, when it's long distance versus being in person. I liked what you were talking about. It is different when you can see yourself talking, right? And then you can't, yeah, and it's a little bit different at first. I'm still getting used to it now, but once you're there, it's kind of like riding a bike. You're flying, right? So thanks for bringing that up, and thanks about talking about the IPV thing. And you know, that's important to know, because we need to make sure that they're safe. And yeah, that's a challenging piece, I think, in this new world. So thanks for talking on that. But that's my 2 cents on everything that you've done. Thank you, and we look forward to next week.
My pleasure. Hopefully see everyone next week.
Yes, okay, everybody stay safe and stay healthy, and we'll all see you and talk to you next week. Thanks, Jessica, again. Okay?
Thank you. Take care.
All right. See you guys.